Well, welcome back to Farmside Chat. I'm Zippy Duvall. I'm host of the Farmside Chat and president of American Farm Bureau, and glad to be with everyone today. I hope that everyone is ready to hear about this favorite vegetable we all have and how it's grown. And we're going to go to Michigan to talk to a young farmer there that farms with their dad and grows asparagus. I love asparagus, and I've even tried to grow a little bit in my yard and haven't been too successful. So I'm real excited about meeting with Jamie VanDerZanden. Hope I said that right.
You did.
In Pentwater, Michigan, Oceana County. Is that correct?
Oceana County, yep.
Oceana County, which is the asparagus capital of the world.
It is, yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Awesome. So we'll just dig right into our podcast today. So welcome, Jamie. We're just so proud to have you. I love talking to all farmers, but especially young farmers, because you bring that energy and passion along with your interview, and we all love to hear about that. So tell us a little bit about your education, because I know you also have an off-farm job. But tell us a little bit about your education there in Michigan.
Yeah, so I went to Michigan State University. They have a program for agriculture there. So I got a bachelor's in agribusiness management. And then right after college, I accepted a job at the local conservation district, just in the town north of Pentwater. And there I was the meat technician. So Michigan has a program that is, I believe it's just Michigan that has a special program. It's called the Michigan Agriculture Environmental Assurance Program. So I was a meat tech. So at the conservation districts, I would work with the local farms and I would do risk management tools. So we would go through risk assessment books. So if I worked with a dairy farm, we would go through like manure management and then record keeping and what they do to keep groundwater and surface water protected from runoff. And then for like a lot of the produce and fruit people, it's a lot of pesticide management and nutrient management. So basically, we would just go through all those risk assessments, and if there's something that the farmer needed help with, so a lot of the farms are already doing the correct practices, but maybe they just need a little extra help with record keeping, or maybe they need a little help with their pesticide storage. Yeah. So we would just help them complete those practices, and then we would recognize them as a environmental friendly farm. So then they get a pretty cool white sign they can put out by their farm that says this farm is environmentally safe. And I really enjoyed working with a whole bunch of different farms because I grew up doing asparagus and pumpkins and row crops. So we had some animals on our farms, like horses and some cows, but I've never grew up on a dairy farm. So like farms like that, I learned something new every time I talked to a farmer. So I really enjoyed that. But what led me back to working with my dad on our farm is that's just where I was like, I just felt like I needed to be. So
yeah. So before we leave that career that you have there, a lot of people don't really understand soil and water districts. I was a soil and water district supervisor. I was back in Georgia, so I'm very familiar with all that. We looked at the soil and water district, and people like you that work for them as, they were our consultants to keep us on the right path. All of us try to do the right things, but sometimes there's new things out there, and sometimes it's just improvements that we can make, but we don't know about them. And y'all bring that to our doorstep. So thank you for that work. It is so important. And so many people that's not connected to agriculture have absolutely no idea that soil and water districts do that assistance and farmers seek it out, and how we work together to make sure that we all doing the right thing. So you said it led you back to you're led back to the farm to work with your dad. Tell us a little bit about growing up on an asparagus farm, and what are some of your favorite memories?
Well, I would say just being able to go to work with my dad. like a lot of kids growing up, they don't get to see their parents work. I got to actually ride in the tractors with him, take asparagus into deliveries. Got to sit on top of the hay wagon when I was too little to actually help. So it's just stuff like that that I feel like a lot of the kids you grow up with, they don't get to experience. So I personally would never regret growing up on a farm. Um, I also got to learn firsthand really good work ethic because my dad, he also ran a construction business along with his farm because that's just how he had to make ends meet. We're not a big farm by any means. We're about 300 acres and about 120 acres asparagus. So we're a smaller farm, but he made it work by having two careers. He spent his life building and working on his farm. So, but no, I would say my favorite memories is just getting to have experiences that other kids in my school didn't. I got to learn how to drive early on before I can even reach the pedal because we're on two tracks. Like, I'm not going to hit anything out there. So, got to ride in the tractors and just got to experience other stuff that kids I grew up with didn't.
So you said you didn't grow up around a dairy. I did, and my dad actually bought 60 cows, went back in dairy business. He says, "You boys ain't gonna have enough energy to get in trouble because I'm gonna keep you busy," and he did. But I have wonderful memories of loving the cows and taking care of them because that's my whole life was around taking care of cows, and you know
Yeah,
they all have little personalities, and some of them
they do.
like some of them are enjoyable, and some of them not quite so much. You know, but the hauling the hay on a hot, humid Saturday, Sunday afternoon in Georgia is not the most favorite thing you want to do, and I have a lot of those memories too. But
Right.
it got my body ready for football in the fall, so I
There
did
you
too.
go.
So wonderful memories, but you're exactly right. A lot of children that don't have exposure to farm, they don't ever have that opportunity to appreciate the land and the water and the soil and the animals and all the work it goes into it and taking care of it. Because when you learn how to take care of that, it also makes you learn how to take care of your friends and neighbors, and your mom, dad, and others as you
Yeah,
grow. So yeah.
yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yep, teaches you all those wonderful things. So, I want to talk about the asparagus capital of the world. When you talk about something being that big of the world, I mean, how big is the asparagus business there in your area?
So Oceana County is not super big, but we have a lot of asparagus farmers, and they've been doing it for years, most of them. So farmers like my dad's generation, they've been doing it since like well, my dad graduated high school in the 70s, so they've been like farming asparagus forever. Um, and so we have a national asparagus festival, which is right in the middle of our harvest season. So actually, growing up as a kid, I didn't even get to experience it that much because we were always busy on the farm. But as I got older, I got a chance to experience, and like the asparagus festival just highlights local asparagus. We have an asparagus queen, and she gets to go to different parades in Michigan and highlight asparagus and try to promote local asparagus. And she gets to also, I believe, get to go to Lansing, our state capital, and she gets to talk to legislators about promoting asparagus. Um, and then we also just have different local restaurants during our harvest season supporting our local farmers. They buy local asparagus, and most of it's like fried asparagus, which you can't pass up deep fried asparagus, even if it's not the healthiest for you. But they also do like local asparagus soups and different recipes to help support local farmers.
So you have that hallmark festival in your county about asparagus. Well,
Yeah.
I have a daughter-in-law that's a princess, a Angus cattle princess.
Oh, cool.
All my grandchildren tease her because they call her Princess Katie. which was, quite a few years ago, but not too many years ago because she's still really young. But it's funny how every community and every commodity has their princesses and their queens,
Yeah,
and we all have those hallmark festivals in our communities around what we grow and what we do there. So they are a lot of fun, but they do come always in the busiest season. So
they do.
let's talk about asparagus. What kind of soil does asparagus like?
Sandy soil.
Sandy soil.
Oh, and at least where we're at in Pentwater, we're just 4 miles from Lake Michigan, so we got really good soil for asparagus. Um, but yeah, it prefers sandy soil.
Okay, I know just enough about it to be dangerous, so I'm not going to suggest anything that I know of being the right thing about asparagus. So tell me a little bit about, when do you plant asparagus? Do you plant it every year? Is it rotated with something? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we don't plant it every year because it's a long-term crop. So if you manage it properly, it could be yielding asparagus every year for 10 to 15 years.
Wow.
So there's a lot of work going into planning where you're going to plant it and what variety and how long you're going to try to harvest from it. So when you do plant it, you plant it usually in April or May. And then, so we buy the seed, and then we actually have another local farm grow the seed into roots, and then they harvest the roots, and then we plant it the next spring when it's roots, and we plant it 8 to 10 inches in a furrow, and
So
then
in a row like corn?
yeah, yep. So you got different, yeah, rows. So and then they're in 8 to 10 inch furrows. So once it's planted that spring, you can't harvest from it for at least a couple of years because you gotta build up the quality, and you don't want to over harvest a new field because then it's not going to produce well. So that's usually how it's planted on our farm. And then, like I said,
So
we don't plant every year.
you put it in as a stolon, kind of like Bermuda grass or a
I'm sorry.
root. You put it
Yep.
in like a root.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep. So we do buy the seed, but we have another local farm grow the roots, and they plant it in the spring, and then the next spring we'll dig up the roots and then we'll plant it. Um, but yeah, you can't plant asparagus every year because it's a long-term crop and it's expensive, and you gotta plan on where you want to plant it. Like I said, are a small farm, so we only have so much land. So once a field has basically used up its lifetime, then we'll take out the asparagus and we'll work the land with cover crop and rotation on other crops to build up the soil again. So you're limited on how much asparagus you can plant when you don't have a lot of land to work with.
yeah.
So, but that's why it's good because it's a long-term crop. So you can,
So if you don't harvest it for the first couple of years, do you let it grow to seed? Do you keep it mowed off? Tell me about that maintenance for 2 or 3 years before you even get anything out of it.
yep. So you still have to fertilize it and you still have to do pesticide management. So unfortunately, at least on our farm, we deal with a lot of asparagus beetles. And it's this little beetle that likes to lay eggs and larvae on the asparagus, and they eat the asparagus. So if that's not managed, then your quality goes down and your asparagus will die. So you still got to manage it for pesticides and disease, and so basically you're managing this crop for a few years and you're not even harvesting it yet. So
Is it going to seed while you're managing it?
it depends on the weather. Like if it's super hot, then yeah, I'll start seeding out because we can't pick it because if it's a new crop, so we don't want to pick it yet. But in the meantime, we're still fertilizing in the spring and managing the pesticides and the
So what
disease.
what what fertilizer does it like? Is it a higher consumer of nitrogen or what?
So that would be a question for my dad. Sorry. I
Um,
don't know that question. I'm sorry.
so what's your biggest responsibility on the farm?
So I do a lot of office work, and then I do a lot of checking the fields for disease and pesticide or disease and insects. So I scout the crops, and then I take the asparagus into the packers. Um, and then I do a lot of field work too. So, but my dad does a lot of the nutrient management and the spraying, and I'm working on him letting me do more of that. So,
So now, what view? I mean, I might have 20 asparagus plants because I tried, and of course, if you don't dig it up, it just stays. It just keeps coming up. And I actually had a friend of mine say, "Well, just put it in your wife's flowers because it'll grow in the spring and then it'll go away." So I got some that sprouts up in my wife's flower beds, uh, and it grows fast. So talk to us about the growing and the harvesting part of it.
yeah, no, asparagus grows really fast, especially when it gets warm. So if it gets super warm, sometimes it's hard to keep up. So once it gets really hot out and the tip starts to fern out, then the fresh quality goes down. So preferably we like low 70s, that temperature, because that's a good speed for our pickers to actually be able to keep up. And we try to do all fresh, at least for our farm, because we're smaller. And then when we can't do all fresh, if it gets too hot and it starts burning out, then a lot of that will go to the processing because they're not super picky about the tip quality.
So
But
So tell us about harvesting. You cut it with knives, break it. How tall is it?
yes, so I wish I could just show everybody a video when I try to describe how we harvest it because that basically shows them exactly what happens. But so we have an asparagus picker. It's a little machine that you can have up to 7 to 5 guys on it, and the middle guy is the guy that is steering the machine and controlling the speed. But he does that with his feet because he's picking while he is steering and making the machine run. And then on the other two sides, we have sometimes 3 guys, sometimes 2 guys. So basically, they're running this machine through the rows in the field and they are snipping the asparagus basically a few inches from the ground. Because for fresh asparagus, we want, I believe it's 8 to 11 inches for it to be fresh. So they're picking straight from the ground, and it's not a slow process. Like they're speeding through the field, so it takes a lot of back work and a lot of skill to do that.
So is that asparagus? If it's 8 to 10 inches tall when you cut it, how long did it take to get that tall? 3, 4, 5, 2 weeks?
No, just in days sometimes.
Just days? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep, it
So
grows fast, especially when it warms up.
yeah, so you're going over a field maybe twice a week, probably.
More than that, sometimes if it's super hot, they're picking the fields twice a day.
Yeah.
It
So I
grows
can
that
just
fast.
get our listeners just imagine. You said 100 and how many acres?
So we roughly do about 120.
120 acres that you got to go over several times a week.
Yes. Yep.
That is a lot of trips across the field and a
It
lot of
is.
back breaking work. And so tell us a little bit about your labor force.
So my dad used to do a lot of domestic workers. So it'd be families that came from Mexico or Texas. Over the years, though, they just become unreliable. And so we started using H2A workers. So it's a program that brings workers from Mexico or other areas that help them get here and teach them how to basically harvest a crop. So, and there's a lot of H2A workers in apples and asparagus. We do H2A workers with pumpkin harvest too, because we do pumpkins. So we really like that program. It's expensive, but we really like it because they're reliable and they're hard workers. Um, and like I said, we have a team that we work with that helps if there's a problem. So we have like a manager that we work with, and a lot of these guys don't speak English, so they have someone that can translate for us, and it works pretty good.
So I know that Michigan Farm Bureau has an organization within their organization that helps farmers get H-2A workers. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that. It's been a great service to farmers and ranchers across Michigan, and one of the few farm bureaus that actually venture into that area. And I always admire them for responding to the needs of the farmers there. So
Yeah.
yeah, Carl Bednarski explained it to me. Y'all's president there. Carl does a tremendous job for y'all as president of Farm Bureau there. So I love asparagus. When I go get it, when I go buy it at the grocery store, I try to buy it fresh, but I do buy some in can because I love asparagus casseroles.
Yeah.
So asparagus, some of it's really thin stemmed, like a pencil, and some
Mhm.
of it be big as my little finger.
Yeah.
So tell me, is that a different variety? Is it just a different marketing scheme? And you're cutting it different, or you're fertilizing it different? What makes a difference?
So it could be all of the above. So I've noticed on our farm that a lot of the thicker asparagus with the bigger diameter is a field that we've had longer, whereas I've noticed that the younger fields are a little smaller diameter. And that could be the variety though too, because like I said, some of these fields are 10 to 15 years old, and I'm 30, so I would have been 15 or so. So I don't know what variety my dad would have planted or what he switched to. We usually stick to Millennium as a variety, or Jersey is another variety we work with.
Jersey,
And
like a cow?
yeah, that's what it's called. But usually we stick with Millennium. But no, it could be all the above, the age of the field, um, fertilizer management, and the variety. Um, Personally, though, a lot of Michigan asparagus is thicker in diameter. So if you look at asparagus in the stores from Mexico or Peru, they're very skinny. And I just feel like there's a lot of difference in the taste when it's a lot skinnier than the thicker stuff. I know some people like the skinnier stuff, but personally, I feel like it tastes better when it's a bigger stalk.
So the nutrition of the stem is most of it in the stem or in the head, the tip, or is the tip and the stem just equally as nutritious?
It's, I believe it's equally. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know, but um, a lot of people just prefer the tip because it's more tender. But you have all the nutrients in the whole stalk of the asparagus. So a lot of people, I feel like, cut off the stalk, but you can use that for a lot of stuff. You can put it in casseroles, like you said, because it's a little more. The tip's a little more tender to eat, and the stalk's a little more. I don't know what word I'm looking for.
Probably coarse.
Tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but if you cook it right, you still have all that nutrients. So you can put it in casseroles or soups, and you can still get all that nutrients that way. Whereas the fresh, if you want more tips for fresh, then that's what people prefer for fresh.
Well, Jamie, it sure is good to have you on today, and got a couple more questions I'd like to ask you about. Tell me what you'd like people to know about your farm or farms like yours or in your area.
Okay. Um, I guess how diverse Michigan agriculture is. So we have a lot of different crops happening throughout the season. Like asparagus is usually May through June, and then you got peaches and cherries and apples and pumpkins and zucchini and squash. Um, so I guess what I would just really like people to know is when local farms are harvesting, because when you go to the grocery store, just because it's May through June and just because your local farmers are harvesting asparagus, that doesn't necessarily mean that that local asparagus isn't there. So, what I would just really like to see for other people to learn about Michigan agriculture in any local farm, whether it's in Georgia or anywhere, like support your local farmers because that makes a huge difference in basically keeping the farm going. So if you see asparagus in the store and you're not sure where it's from, ask the grocery store. And if it's not from Michigan, when Michigan is in their peak harvest, ask them, hey, let's support our local farmers. Can we get a Michigan asparagus? First of all, I mean, I might be biased because I'm a Michigan asparagus farmer, but I think it tastes better and it's fresher. Like I said, 48 to 72 hours, we can get fresh asparagus in the grocery stores. Basically, I would say support your local farmers and know where your food is coming from, especially during the peak harvest.
So how do they find out about your farm or other farms that grow asparagus?
How do they find?
How do they find out about it? Where would they could they go to look?
So in Michigan, there's a lot of different places that promote local farms. So Farm Bureau. Farm Bureau likes to highlight local farms, and you can learn a lot about local farms through your local Farm Bureau. Conservation districts. When I worked at the conservation district, like I said, I worked with local farms, and we would put on farm tours that would highlight local farms in the area and the practices they do to help the environment. So you can learn a lot about different farms that way. I follow Michigan Grown, Michigan Great on Instagram, or there's Michigan Asparagus you can follow. We have Taste the Local Difference is a place that highlights different local farms during the season too. There's just a whole bunch of different places you can basically learn about different farms, and sometimes it's not easy to find, but if you know of your local Farm Bureau, they can direct you to those places or the conservation district. That's where I learned a lot about different places like that.
Jamie, tell us how you cook asparagus. What's your favorite way to cook it and consume
So I'm super busy during the asparagus season, so I don't get much time to cook. But when I do, I really like to grill it. So you put it in tin foil, and then I just put salt, pepper, olive oil, and I like to put Parmesan cheese on it too. And then you just grill it to the desired tenderness you want. I personally like it a little tender. Or I really like when I actually have time. I don't know if you ever had them, but I just call them asparagus roll-ups. So you blanch the asparagus. So you basically boil the asparagus for about 3 to 4 minutes. Then you dump it into cold ice water. And then you take it out of the ice water, you let it dry off a little bit. And then you're gonna roll it up with ham and cream cheese. I really like that. And then of course you can't beat asparagus soup or casseroles. So anything with egg and asparagus is good too.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you, Jamie, for joining us. Thank you for what you do in the Soil Water District, and also as a young farmer. We really appreciate you joining us today and educating us on everything there is to know about asparagus. So
well, thank you for having me.
Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank everyone for joining us on Farmside Chat. Hope you enjoyed learning about Michigan agriculture and asparagus, and go to the store and buy you a bundle today. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Farmside Chat. Please be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, take a minute to rate and review the podcast. This helps us continue to bring you farm fresh content that everyone can enjoy. Until next time, thank you and God bless you.